It's very unique, right? It's affordable housing, and that's something that I'm very passionate about. Is providing affordable housing outside of subsidies, and giving people four walls that are their own, right? Without apartments, are very popular, but you got somebody walking above you, you got noisy neighbors next door that are screaming at each other. And in a mobile home, you have your own four walls, you have a yard, you have a parking pad typically.
Welcome back to Curiosity Class, the podcast where we break down complex topics into easy to understand ideas and bite-sized pieces. My name is Jeff Album, and I've been a curious person my entire life. Inspired by Albert Einstein's quote, "If you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it well enough," we aim to make learning accessible and engaging. On this show, we're going to bring you experts from various fields, ranging from personal finance to physics, to help you understand everything from 401ks to how airplanes fly. So let's dive in and satisfy our curiosity together. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Curiosity Class. I am super honored to have my new friend, Andrew Keel, joining us today. And Andrew's going to be talking to us about a whole host of things: real estate investing, being a father, all kinds of stuff. So Andrew, thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jeff.
Well, we can dive into so many different topics, but do you want to give people a quick overview of who you are now, and then we'll dive into your story of how you got here?
Yeah. I'm a father of four, and recently relocated to the Charlotte, North Carolina area. Started out in sales, grew into a sales manager role, and then started flipping houses on the side after college, and wholesaling as well. And through that, I found a couple of mobile homes that I was a motivated seller. They wanted to move them. And basically, I bought these mobile homes, got on YouTube, got a really good deal on them. It was $1,100 a piece for these two mobile homes. Got on YouTube and found this guy named Lonnie Scruggs, who teaches a class, Deals on Wheels, of how to buy mobile homes, fix them up, and then sell them. And I became hooked, selling them on contract, with monthly payments for an end buyer to live in them. And I got hooked. I was like, the demand was, insane. And I did like 20 of these Lonnie deals with the individual trailers. Met a park owner who took me under his wing and really took a liking to me. And we were at lunch one day, and he says, "Hey, you really should get into owning the whole park instead of just the individual homes. It's more scalable. There's tax benefits to owning real estate instead of the personal property, which is the homes." And he basically pointed me in the right direction. He says, "Hey, you need to go to this boot camp and do A, B, C, and D." And so I just dove in. I had enough income off of the current Lonnie deals that covered my expenses every month. So then I was freed up, and I said, all right, this is my thing. This is my aha moment. Went all in, went to all the seminars, got educated. And at one of the seminars I went to, actually, I sat next to a gentleman who just happened to be an executive at Goldman Sachs. And that was my very first private equity partner. He basically gave me $5 million to buy my first 5 parks. And that helped me build a track record. And, then I was able to, raise money from friends and family after I showed them, the case study of those 5 deals. And long story short, now we own 50 mobile home parks. We own and self-manage. We have a vertical integration system platform with property management company and an acquisitions wing that does, our acquisitions and wholesales some of the properties that we don't buy and hold. But yeah, that's how we got here.
So you know a thing or two about mobile home investing.
A thing or two, man. I'm always learning new stuff. I'm just so curious myself, of other operators and different ways to do things. I have a certain model, right? That's like buy C-grade mobile home parks and fix them up and make them better. But there's so many other models, even within the mobile home park niche. So it's such an exciting, time to be in real estate and to be here.
And what was the timeline from when you were first buying those Lonnie deals you talked about to buying your first exclusive park or entire park?
So it was 2015 that I was doing those Lonnie deals. And then I bought my first park in June of 2017. So, it took about 2.5 years to kind of get there. But then, once I was there, it was just it was just, you could see it, like the demand for the affordable housing is so strong, and it's a very good asset class.
For sure. And man, I love that you touched on that because I think a lot of people might hear mobile home parks and think real estate investing and wonder how those two kind
Mm.
of click. So, do you want to give people a background on just explain the asset class?
Yeah, it's very unique, right? It's affordable housing, and that's something that I'm very passionate about. Is providing affordable housing outside of subsidies, and giving people four walls that are their own, right? Without apartments, are very popular, but you got somebody walking above you, you got noisy neighbors next door that are screaming at each other, and in a mobile home, you have your own four walls, you have a yard, you have a parking pad typically, so it's a little bit different, but our model is we don't own the mobile homes themselves. We want all of the residents to own their homes, and then we're just renting out the dirt, the land underneath of them, and getting a monthly lot rent. And that's what a lot of the big banks are wanting is mostly tenant owned homes in the community, and public utilities, private, the utility infrastructure is very important. That's like the most important, most expensive piece of the property is those land improvements. But yeah, demand is off the charts. It's very hard to get new mobile home parks zoned. So from a supply and demand standpoint, the demand is off the charts. Supply is fairly limited. It's been said that there's actually more mobile home parks that are torn down than there are new ones being built, on an ongoing basis because of the zoning restrictions and NIMBY, not in my backyard,
Mm,
things like that. It's very, very difficult to get these zoned. And then when you're looking at the ones that are being built, they're the luxury 5-star manufactured housing communities that are not necessarily affordable. They're more lifestyle choice communities in Texas, Florida, Arizona. They're not the affordable housing options in the Midwest or elsewhere that is truly an affordable option. So it's a very unique niche, and it's a very operational piece of real estate. It's not your triple net, Starbucks building. It's very hands-on, property management companies. Most of the operators that are in the mobile home park space have their own property management company because it's very hard for a third party to manage these effectively.
man, that's so cool. So just to make sure I'm understanding, so the mobile home park that the type that you buy is you're buying the land, and the land has a certain amount of lots or
Mm-hmm.
spaces, and
Mm-hmm.
call it, what's a typical amount of, I'm sure it varies, but
Say
how
about
many?
50 lots or more is typically
Okay.
our criteria. Yeah.
So you buy this park and it has basically space for 50 lots, and each lot has a tenant owned home, which is their mobile home, which is really cool.
Correct. Yeah. So they'll own their home. They're responsible for repairs and maintenance, but also just there's a quality of like tenant-owned home communities just have a higher kind of people care, right? Like this is their community. They want it to look nice, and yeah, it's just a subdivision.
Right. And you have pride of ownership, and you align incentives really well for everyone to be on the same page, which is really
Exactly.
cool.
Yeah.
Really cool. So when you first got started, well, actually, before we get there, so you mentioned the affordability aspect, which is amazing. And I think everybody who has ever heard of real estate knows that there's a huge affordability crisis.
Hmm.
So what does affordability look like? Like, how much is a typical lot rent fee on a monthly basis?
Yeah. Typical lot rent in our parks is around $350 a month.
Okay.
And the tenants will also pay their utilities and trash, just as I do in the subdivision I live in.
Right.
So the average monthly housing cost maybe is about 450, 500 all in when they own their home. So when you look at that, it's very, very affordable. And it's not subsidized, right? Like this is your mobile home. And a lot of people instantly think of like the worst case scenario when they think of trailer parks and mobile home parks. And you'd be so surprised that many of our tenants just choose this. Like they don't want that big housing cost over their head that requires them to work full time. A lot of them say, "Hey, I just want to work part time. I want my wife to be at home with the kids." And they're choosing to live this way so that they don't have the burden of a big monthly housing payment.
For sure. And also, I think it's also an important thing to say that if anyone thinks of a trailer park and then goes on your website and sees the pictures of your units, it's very clear that this is this is not the same thing.
Yes, and like in anything, right? There's apartments that are, not managed the best, right? And they get a certain way. And in mobile home parks, of course, there's some of those that have, gotten out of hand and aren't being managed as well. But the parks that we have, we are incentivized to keep them at a certain level. The banks require us, and the financing that we're, trying to get require us to keep these at a high level, and they're doing inspections, they're sending out engineers. So
Hmm.
it's you're really aligned with the residents and the tenant base to keep the property, at a good level, well maintained.
Sure, sure. I would love to dive into some of the specifics of one of these types of deals, just because I think it'd be really interesting to learn more about. So, you had
Sure.
mentioned in your conference you sat next to your first private equity partner, which
Hmm.
is I think a little bit backwards of how it normally goes. But so take one of those first five deals that you were talking about. Give us some details on how much did it cost, what were you bringing to the table, how much was your partner bringing to the table, and what did that deal look like?
Yeah, first deal I ever did was a 67 lot park in Edwardsville, Illinois, just outside of St. Louis. Beautiful property, had septic tanks and county water. So it's like a public water, which is much more preferred because then they're taking care of, you don't have to worry about a well water system and chlorine levels and testing and things like that. But of the 67 lots, 58 were occupied, and of the 58 that were occupied, there was, I think it was 8 that were park owned homes that were like like rent to own agreements where the previous owners had originated like these rent to own agreements, putting people on the plan to buy these 8 homes eventually and then be tenant owned homes.
Okay.
So we bought the property.
And sorry, just really
Yeah, go
quick,
ahead.
if 8 of those were tenant or park-owned homes, the rest of the 50, so the 50 other homes were tenant-owned already?
Tenant owned already.
Got it,
Exactly.
okay.
Exactly. And of the, so what we did is we came in, we brought in, geez, it would have been 9 homes that we brought in to fill the vacant lots.
Mhm.
So I raised money for the down payment. I raised money to bring in those 9 homes. I raised money there was in due diligence, we found that there was an issue with the water pressure in the park. So we installed a pressure relief valve after we bought the park, that lowered the water pressure down to more like 35 to 40 PSI instead of like 80, which was causing a lot more water leaks because the pressure was so high in the lines. So, in due diligence is really important, especially on the utility infrastructure, because that's where your high dollar items, repair items could originate. So, uh, sent an email out to my equity partner, and we just did a straight split. I brought 100K, he brought 300K, and basically we split it. He got 40% ownership, I got 60, and I managed everything and ran the
And
project.
remind us of the purchase price?
Purchase price was 1.34 million.
Okay. So
Yep.
of the 300K that your partner brought and the 100 that you brought, that served as the down payment to then go get bank financing for the rest?
Down payment for the bank financing. We used a local bank for the financing. I think it was 75% loan to value,
Okay.
25-year amortization. Interest rate at the time, this was 2017, I think was like very low, like 4.5, something like that.
Wow.
And we basically, we bought the property, improved it. It was a very simple. A lot of the value add revolves around occupancy. It's just like, here,
Mhm.
there's vacant lots here. We're going to put homes here. We're going to get them filled and sold, and then getting those park owned homes converted to tenant owned homes was another big part of it. And now to this day, I just had a meeting earlier today. All 67 lots are occupied. They're all tenant owned homes now. Now, like
Okay.
they've all converted to fully tenant owned. Lot rent now is $425 a month. When we bought it, it was around $300 a month. So we've been able to, increase rents as inflation and other things have come into play, and then a few years later, what our plan is we'll refinance. We refinanced, I think, 21 months after buying the property. So just under 2 years, we refinanced. We're able to pull out our initial equity and still own the property, still cash
Mhm.
flow the property, but we got our 400K out, to go do another deal and do the same thing. So it's it's a very it's a very good business. There's a lot of value to be added. And I think if you asked our residents, it's being managed at a much higher level than it was before. We're on maintenance requests. We're on when the roads, potholes and things like that pop up. We're on snow plowing, and we're getting things done faster with more professional management.
Mm-hmm. Man, that's so cool. And just
Thank you.
the idea of value add real estate investing, it continues to blow my mind every time I hear about it. But that example is one of the most beautiful explanations of how it works, right? You put your money in, you make improvements, you make the property, you increase the value of the property, and then you're able to refinance, pull your initial equity out, and still have positive cash flow. So effectively, you have $0 into the deal, which is
Yeah.
all the while improving tenant lives, quality of life in the community, making it holistically better. It's just such a win-win.
And let me comment on this because I dabbled in 2021 into self storage, and
Okay.
I learned very quickly that mobile home parks and self storage are not the same, right? And the big reason is the stickiness of the tenant base. In a mobile home park, when someone owns their home and they're a tenant owned home, the turnover on those units is like 5% or less per year. Like they stay because it's so affordable compared to any
Sure.
other option. Where in any other asset class, like apartments, for example, you're going to have 50% plus turnover, annually, and
Right.
in self storage, 10% of our tenant base moves out every month, and we have to replace that 10% with a new, with new people every month.
Right.
So it's
Right.
way more marketing driven, pay-per-click driven, pricing driven, and it was more difficult for us to manage because of the attention that it needed. Where you'd say, oh, affordable housing, mobile home parks, that's going to be very tough to manage. That's going to be way tougher than self-storage, which is, you can automate it, you can use technology, you can use kiosks, yada, yada, yada. But it's not always the case, with the
Right.
revenue management and the pricing. It's very market specific, and we learned a ton. But mobile home parks, we definitely favor over self-storage.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. How easy is it if a tenant decides, or if a resident decides that they do want to move? How hard or easy is it to physically move a mobile home?
It's very hard. Yeah, they're not exactly mobile. It may cost $5,000 to $10,000 to move one of these things, just 1,000 yards down the road, because you have all the utility connections, you have the block level tie down, the axles, the wheels. It's not an inexpensive process. So it's very different from the RV park industry,
Mm-hmm.
where those they can get up and leave in the middle of the night, very quickly. Mobile home parks and manufactured housing, these are very tough to move. I've done it myself. I've been under homes, and it is a full day process to move one of these things and the equipment that's required. So I think that's also part of that stickiness factor is, hey, when someone is in one of these, they typically will sell the home. They're not going to move it out. They'll sell the home where it is to a new family to live in the home in its exact spot. They're not going to take the home
Mm,
and move it out and continue living in the home, which is unique.
got it. Got it. And so going back to this first deal that you were talking about, so this was in Illinois, you said?
Illinois. Yep.
Okay.
Edwardsville, Illinois.
And remind me where you lived at the time.
I lived in Orlando, Florida at the time.
Okay. So how did that work?
Man, I flew up there and lived there for the first month of ownership.
Okay.
I got very lucky. The on-site manager that was there when I bought it. Her name is Diana Rice, and her husband is Jerry Rice. Not the NFL football player, but they were just amazing. Like on site, it was like a team. Like he was the maintenance guy, she was more the admin work and tenant relations person, and they were just an awesome duo management team. So that made things way infinitely easier when you have good boots on the ground that you can trust. So she helped out, and then I was on site, learning just trial by fire, right? I was good at sales. I was a sales manager in another life. So when I knew, okay, I need to go out and I need to find 9 mobile homes to fill these vacant lots, that's where my focus went. And I went and scoured the whole area and found some homes to bring in and get those set up. But then, Diana helped out, tremendously with a lot of just the coordination and transport and things like that. So it's, It's a very, very awesome project.
And after a month of living there, did you go back to Florida? And you're like, okay,
I
I feel
did.
good about our processes and
Yeah, yeah. I went back to Florida. I mean, it was on when you buy your first one. Uh, it's just like at the same time I still had more of those Lonnie deals and I was flipping houses. So I was trying to like build a property management company, but I didn't really know what I was doing. And in at the time I was talking to someone the other day, and it's like we can manage our mobile home parks so much better now because I'm not wearing all these different hats, right?
mm,
People were paying by check and money order and mailing them to Florida to pay. And it was like, you know, at a certain point, we just now we can collect rent online, and there's cash pay and pay lease, integrations and a property management software. And we have people like that can do the background checks, that can do the home sales marketing. So we have people that specialize, and we're able to do so much more with having a little bit of scale. Where on that first one, I was opening all the mail. I just remember just the mail alone was like a whole hour every day, just going through all the mail and these checks and depositing them. It was just taking up a ton of time. So
right,
at this point, we've have way better systems, but we had to learn, by literally being hands on.
for sure. So I'd love if we can kind of walk through the process of you growing your company. Because I think a lot of people might be able to relate, or if you're an investor listening to the show, you might be you've bought a couple properties, you've kind of started to have some scale, but it's nowhere to the point where
Mm,
you would think about hiring someone, for example. So
yeah.
what was that process like how did you know you were ready to hire someone or bring someone on full time?
Because it felt like the wheels were falling off. And I was just talking with my business partner about this, where like we've gone through this like growth phase like three times. We're like three times now getting up to, I think we have 3,200 lots that we manage. So getting up to this, I'll never forget going past 500 lots. That was like our first hurdle, where it was like we needed people, we needed a team, but we couldn't afford them because we didn't
Hmm.
have enough, management fee income coming in. So
Right.
we were operating at a loss up until we got to about 1,000 lots, where I was using the cash flow that from my GP shares to cover the management fees, to kind of get us to that point. But at 500 was really important. 1,000 was another breakthrough. And then really until we got up to about 2,500 lots. And that's another breaking point where you don't think about the amount of mail that comes in. You don't think about
Right.
the paying the bills, right? And like making sure that like certain timelines are set and checking usage numbers. And you can get very granular with it, with the management of things. And it's way more than just collecting rent, right? You think, okay, it's just as long as I'm collecting rent, everything's fine. There's way more than that, because you just have to stay on these things. It's
Right.
an operational intensive business. It's not,
Right.
a triple net, retail investment. This is, you got to be on it. You got to make sure that the violations are being issued and you get eyes on these things with drive-through videos. So, yeah, but I think, our big metrics that we follow is, occupancy. That's our queen bee role. If you read Clockwork, that's our most important thing. Collections is number two. Water sewer bill back recapture is number three, where a lot of our parks are master metered, and then we sub meter the water to charge our tenants for their usage. And
Hmm.
then property condition and budget actual difference are our major five things that we're looking at every day.
Gotcha. Got it. Okay. So going back to just when you're talking about the you were taking the GP split to cover the management fee. So I want
Mm.
to break down all those because that's really, really cool information that I want to make sure people are understanding. So can you explain kind of well, maybe we'll start with the GP split, like what that means, and then we'll go into the specifics of management fees.
Yeah, so basically, I'm a general partner, and then the investors in my deals are passive investors, limited partners, and we create an LLC or a partnership, and they are partners in the property with us. They own a portion of the property, but theirs is more of an economic interest, where the general partners, are the managers of the entity. We're the
Hmm.
ones doing the operations. We're the one issuing distributions and things like that. So that's there's just it's a partnership. There's maybe 10 investors that invested $50,000. And then there's myself, that would be a general partner. You can have multiple general partners. Some of our deals, we have a couple, and the general partners are actually, the ones doing the work and managing the property. And the limited partners are just passive investors that are getting, some sort of return for their investment in the deal.
Got it. And so how do you know what your fee is going to be? So do you charge a GP fee monthly, annually? How does that work?
We don't do that. Ours is just a split of the equity. So, a lot of our deals are, hey, you're going to get the limited partners are going to get a 10% preferred return, which is like they're going to get a return, the first 10% the property generates, if
Mm-hmm.
it generates a return, right? Like it's not a guarantee that the
Mm-hmm.
property will generate a return. But hey, the investors will get the first 10%. And then every dollar after that will go back to paying their money back. And then once we've paid their money back, then us as GPs will get a split, pro rata of the cash flow,
Mm-hmm.
ongoing. So that's kind of our promote is earning, our equity piece, after we've given the preferred return and the money back to the initial investors.
So you wouldn't start taking a distribution on the GP side until all investor capital had been returned?
That's right. Yeah, we feel that's the
S-
best way to align us. But we do get like an acquisition fee of 1% that kind of helps, with the whole sales process and keeps things going. We also get a 6% of gross property management fee, and that comes through and helps the property management company. And then whenever we sell the asset or refinance, we get like a disposition fee of 1%. But we don't
Got it.
have like an asset manager fee or anything on top of that. We try to keep our deals as skinny as possible.
So what were you using to pay the property management side before you had hit 500 units at scale?
Yeah, that was just, we didn't have a lot of people. It was myself, and I had a college roommate that, John Scortino, who was my COO, it was just him and me, and we were tag teaming it. And then we eventually hired, an assistant. And the reason how we scaled it up from 500 lots really to about 2,500 was using virtual assistants. And that was
Mm,
helping us get more manpower, with, minimal, monthly expense.
hmm.
uh, but it was just it's been a lot of travel still to this day for myself and for John Scortino to get out to these properties, because that's one thing
Hmm.
the virtual assistants can't do, right? Is get on
Sure.
site. So then we would go on site, create a checklist of what's needed, allocate that to the virtual assistants, and then they would kind of work with the on-site team to execute the changes.
Got it. Got it. Got it. So if I'm understanding, you would take kind of the small fees, not really collected on an ongoing basis, but
Yeah,
basically just when you buy the property, you get 6% of, you said, gross property management fees on a monthly basis. That was some recurring cash or recurring revenue that you could collect.
revenue. Yeah,
And then on disposition, so that was what you were using to fund kind of everything you were doing as you were
yes.
growing up until 500 units.
That's right. Yeah. And
Wow.
there was times where it was negative, like I said, because we would need to hire people, but the revenues weren't there yet. And a lot of these were value add deals, Jeff. So we're talking about, deals where, hey, we bought a park that was 75 lots, but there's only 40 occupied. So that
Right.
6% was smaller in the beginning until we executed the business plan and got all 75 sites occupied. So
Right.
that was tough, and my model is not, like, not common. I think a lot of other first time syndicators that are trying to get into this, they will have more promote fees involved, and they'll get less equity, because they need those fees to kind of survive. Where, my thought was, hey, at this point I have the cash. I would rather have a bigger slice of the equity instead of adding all the fees on the front end.
Sure. And were you supporting yourself personally through this time from other sources of income outside of the syndication?
I had those like 20 Lonnie deals
Yeah.
that were like the individual trailers that I had sold on contract,
Okay.
where, like, I had some money coming in. It was like $3,500 a month coming in, so that kind of covered
Okay.
my bases. But also my wife helped tremendously. She worked full time when we were just kicking things off the ground. And I think if I could go back, like, and I look at like how my brothers and how other people are living, like, we lived very cheap. Like, we had one car between my wife and I. I worked from home, and she would take the car to work. She used to work at a golf school, and she was like, part of the admissions team. and that got it done. We had one car, we had a small 2,000 square foot house that we lived in with our two babies, and we were able to live inexpensively to
Yeah.
be to focus during those years on building the business. And
Yeah.
that was so important, Jeff. Like it's I can't speak enough about the delayed gratification effect, because it just went like this, man. It went like this. And now, we're in a much bigger house, on the lake. We're living our dream out because of those early days when we sacrificed.
Dude, that's so cool.
It's
I
awesome,
I
man.
love hearing that.
It's possible. It's so
If
possible.
if you don't mind sharing, I would love to know like what so before you hit 500 units, it sounds like you basically were cash flow break even or maybe even
Yeah.
negative some months.
Yeah.
And then after 500 units, you started to hit some levels of scale, assuming you started becoming cash flow positive, but you still weren't taking GP splits, right? So did you
Let
start
me
to
let me
sell some assets? How
So,
did
because that's a really important point. So, a lot of our deals with rates being so low, we would
Mhm.
send them out to investors and say, "Hey, this is going to be a 5-year deal. That's what we expected to get you these returns." Well,
Right.
we were able to expedite it. We were able to refi in like 18 months, 2 years, 3 years. So we took these 5-year timelines and we were able to smush them in. So now we started getting those GP splits
Got it.
earlier, and on some of these refis with interest rates being way lower than we pro forma'd, we were able to pull out a lot of cash at the refinance above and beyond the initial equity we put in. So we put in,
Got it.
400K, and we'd pull out 1.4 million at the
Got
refi,
it. Got it. Got it.
and we would use some of that money to reinvest as well.
Got it. Okay. So that kind of started to really accelerate and kind of like rocket fuel, just
It's
be
just,
able to
yeah,
scale and grow. And
exactly.
so when you would do those refinances and you were able to pull out significantly more cash than the initial equity infusion had been,
Hmm.
how does that work LPGP wise? Do you give, is that just per deal? So sometimes the
Per
investors get
deal,
it.
exactly. Per deal, it's a split, right? So once we pay back, we'll do the refinance. We pay back, say it's 400K that we raised from investors. We pay
Mhm.
back the 400K, and then that extra million, it just depends on the split of the deal, but say it's 50-50. The investor pool splits 50% of that extra million, and then the general partners, myself, would get that other 50% of that. And then, the cash flow ongoing would also be split 50-50. So that's like
Got
a,
it.
a similar way to how it's done.
Because once you paid all the investors out, there's no preferred return because they don't have any money
Exactly.
left in the deal. So then all
Exactly.
cash flow becomes 50-50.
Yep. It'd just be a
Got it.
pro rata split. Exactly.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Okay. Man, that's amazing.
It's awesome, and it's a good deal for the investors, right? Because otherwise, they would have this money in the stock market, or annuities or something, or in a CD, and they're able to invest in affordable housing, which is desperately needed.
Yeah.
Like you may see, I don't care what you say, but like developing, affordable housing is it doesn't make sense. Like if you're going to develop something, you're going to do it for the luxury high end. That's where the most
Right.
profit is, right?
Right.
So in affordable housing, you're keeping these units because there's more mobile home parks torn down every year and turned into multifamily or a subdivision than there are new ones being built, because there's higher and better land uses. So
Right.
when we're keeping these things as mobile home parks, and in addition to that, we're creating this win-win for investors where it's like, hey, this is a good return, right? That you're getting tax benefits, you're getting depreciation. Like these are good returns, and you're doing good for this community. So it's been like really close to my heart, like what we do, and I'm just super passionate about it.
Dude, that's so cool. That's
Thank
so
you.
cool. And from kind of once you started to hit some scale, at what point did you start taking either distributions yourself personally or a salary, or is that, I know you said that's when you hired your first assistant that was not a VA. What
That's
did
right.
that picture look like at the company level? Like how much money, how much revenue was the company bringing in? And then how much did you hire your first person for? How did you feel comfortable or know what to do there?
Man, see, that's such a tough question, because there's been so many levels that we've kind of crossed through. But I think personally that if you're doing, 10,000 a month in revenue, you should have a virtual assistant. Like any
Hmm.
business owner, you need to have a virtual assistant for, we really like Armenia and South Africa. We found really good pockets of people there that are very highly educated and fully capable. South Africa has a very nice kind of English accent. Armenians is a little more harsh, but they're super detailed and they're assertive and good managers of people. So we've just been, for $1,500 to $2,000 a month, you can get a full-time employee that's plugged in front of their computer, motivated, and just super grateful for the role. And as we've been able to recruit people that have actually done property management over there, it's all the same. The basics, the foundation is the same. So we're able to carry that into what we do, and it's been a really good marriage.
And do you have any advice for how to find folks in those countries? Do you use any
It's
online
so,
resources?
yes, in the beginning we had to use these like really unique websites overseas, but we've been using Indeed, and just putting it as a
Oh,
remote job in Johannesburg, South Africa, and getting a ton of really good quality people. So literally just start your ad at 1,200 to 1,500 a month, and you'll see people with full on degrees, and the dollar goes a long ways over there. So it's a really just good hotbed of talent that we've tapped into.
for sure. Yeah, that's really smart. I would never have thought to use Indeed. I've known like Fiverr and onlinejobs.ph, etc., but that's super smart to use Indeed.
Yeah,
Hmm.
it's worked
So then at
tremendously.
what point did you transition to hiring your first US based full-time employee? Where
Yeah,
was the company
so
revenue then?
I mean, the first one was my partner and John Scortino. He he didn't take the biggest salary initially. He worked at some software firms and was like a project manager there. And he left to come work with us. Took less money, but got equity. Looking at the bigger picture in the longer term. So that was our first hire. But most recently, we've hired two regional managers from like bigger mobile home community companies that have managed a portfolio of 20 parks or so, and we've hired them in house to really help us, optimize our operations team and just to stay on it, because there are nuances, right, with park-owned homes and tenant-owned homes, and people trying to buy homes out of our park and move them out. So if you're not giving it that high level of attention, things will start to slip. And the value of an occupied lot in most of our parks is around $45,000 to $55,000. So when one of those homes gets moved out in the middle of the night
Hmm.
because somebody wasn't paying attention, that's a huge loss in terms of the value of the property.
Right. Right. And I know you said that you guys were still traveling a good amount to get on site. Is that still the case to this day, that you and your
It
partner are going
is.
out and seeing stuff?
It is. Yeah. We try to get to every property at least once a quarter, once every 3 months. And it's a lot.
Wow.
Thankfully we have some clusters because our properties are mostly in the Midwest. So we can
Okay.
fly into Indianapolis, we can fly into Des Moines, and just hit a whole portfolio over the course of a week. And that is what we try to do to be most efficient.
And do you have, for those kind of clusters like you're talking about, do you have one on-site manager at one community that oversees all the cluster, or do you have one per community?
In some that are very close together, like in the same town or a town over, we'll have one on-site community manager. But if they're about an hour apart from each other, we would rather just have boots on the ground that's in the park or in the
Mm-hmm.
community that lives nearby to
Mm-hmm.
manage that park. Just because it's nice to have someone that can get on the ground there, talk to the tenants. Some of our tenants are elderly, and the technology and things like that is just not first nature to them. So if
Right.
we could sit down and train them and help them walk through setting up the tenant portal, getting lined up on ACH, they're happier. There's a better experience. They're not, feeling, like we've kind of just like thrown them into something they're not ready for.
For sure. For sure. And are those like, if they're living in the community, do they get like a rent subsidy or something, or how does that work?
Sometimes, yeah. So we like to have the on-sites just pay rent, and then we just pay them their salary, whatever that is, instead of
Got
like
it.
doing a probation, because we don't want the financials to be affected. We don't want the lower revenue numbers when we go to refinance because we gave free rent to someone. So we'll just pay
Gotcha.
them like a regular W-2 employee
Got
and
it.
do it that way.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Man, that is so cool.
Thank
That
you,
is so
man. No,
cool.
it's been a lot of work. It's been super fun, but there's also been times, right, where like we've gotten a black eye. We made a mistake during COVID, for example. Our accounts payable gal was working remotely, and she was going to the PO box to get the mail every day, and she got behind, and didn't tell us. So then we had all these bills that hadn't been paid, and so I remember I got this big banker's box, and I put it on my dining room floor and just started spreading out all the mail and opening all the mail. And, there was delinquencies and things like that. And, we have to get these things paid. Otherwise they'll shut the water off. So,
Right, right,
as a COO or CEO, I had to I had to do it myself. I had to open the mail. I had to write the checks. I had to make sure that we got those paid. And like, there's been moments where, blood, sweat, and tears have had to go into this business, and it makes it worth it. If it was easy, it wouldn't have the effect and the same feeling that it gives me to this day.
right. Yeah, that makes sense. I think it sounds the same tune, I think, is heard by a lot of the most successful CEOs, is that a lot of times you need to provide systems to be able to scale, and you need
Mm,
to rely on other people, and sometimes you need to pull up your sleeves and do it yourself.
yeah, 100%.
I'd love to switch over a little bit and switch topics into kind of to mindsets,
Mm,
because I think obviously you have created an enormous amount of success for not only yourself but for your employees, for your tenants, for your communities that you oversee,
mm.
um, and you did that with your mindset. So how talk to me a little bit about what do you think about on a regular basis?
Man, I think about gratitude is the first thing. I have sticky notes like all over my screen. I have it signs in my house, to just think and to recenter and talk about just being grateful for what we have. But in the early days, I will say one thing that I did that really gave me that confidence, right? Because like it's confidence in the beginning. Was I trained really hard for triathlons, and I did some Ironmans, and the whole motto of Ironman is anything is possible. And so, when I did a full Ironman, it was in 2020 that I did the full Ironman, the year of COVID. And after doing that, I remember just thinking, wow, if I could do this, like where I was like, I grew up kind of, I was a bigger kid, like a little chunky, but I played football in college, a little thicker kid, not an endurance body type by any means. But after doing that, it just really was eye opening to me that like you really can do anything you set your mind to. And every night, but when I put my kids to bed, I kiss them on the cheek and I say, hey, you can do anything you set your mind to. Because I think like there's nothing else that matters. If you really want something, I really think that you can get it, you can achieve it. So it's important.
And are you still training for triathlons now? Are you still doing Ironmans
I'm
now?
not. I'm not. I switched it up. I'm actually doing more weightlifting. I just am attracted to that now. It feels better and it kind of gives me more energy. So I still run every Sunday. I think I ran 6 points. Yeah, I ran 6.6 miles yesterday,
Okay.
which felt good. But uh, yeah, I'll never forget those 5 hour long bike rides that I used to be doing when I was doing the Ironman training. Every week, 5.5 hours on the bike. Uh, Lots of memories.
So what does a typical day look like for you? Because you're a father of four, you're a husband, you're a CEO, you got a lot of stuff going on. How do you manage to fit everything in? Like walk us through a typical Wednesday in the life of Andrew.
Man, that's a great question. That's so interesting. It's changed, right? But right now, I wake up around 6:45. I make the
Okay.
kids eggs, uh, and usually they have the toaster waffles. They'll have
Okay.
like some eggs and toaster waffles and some fruit, and then I'll take them to school. I have two that go to the same school, and then another one goes to a preschool that's near the YMCA here where I live. So I
Okay.
drop them off. I'll go to the gym and do my weight workout. I'll do my endurance for about a half hour. I'll sit in the sauna for about 15 to 20 minutes, and then I'll come home and eat lunch around noon.
Okay.
And then I actually start work around 1 o'clock, and then I'll work from like 1 to 6. And that's go time. I'm in the saddle. I'm in this office.
Mm.
doing interviews like this. I do a lot of investor relations and capital raising, and reviewing underwriting of new deals that the sales team is the acquisitions team is looking at. So that's really where 80% of my efforts go, and then the other 20% is spot checking the operations team and getting hands on with them. So after that, have dinner with the family, cook something up good. I like to cook, so that'll be fun. And then usually in bed by 9:30 with four little ones. It's I get tired early now.
Do you have any parent advice? Any advice for
Oh
soon to be
man,
parents?
I would say, wow, I would say the sleep training. We read a book early on that helped. We actually have hired a sleep training consultant early on that like helps with the nap schedule, the feeding schedule, and everything with the babies early on. I think like if I don't sleep or my wife doesn't sleep, like we turn into zombies, and
Mhm.
it's just so harder to do everything else. So I would just the sleep training and trying to get your babies on a sleep schedule, as soon as possible, I think is something that every new parent needs to invest in.
Mm, okay. Good to know. Good to know.
Are you going to
Thank
be
you.
a father soon? Are you telling us something?
Yeah, we're expecting our first in June of 2025.
Congrats, man. That's amazing. That's so
Thank you.
awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, so super stoked, but you know, also just trying to get as much advice as I possibly can.
Dude, that and get a diaper genie. If you don't know what that
Okay.
is, just Google it. But that is money for changing diapers, and you put it in the diaper genie, and it doesn't smell up the whole house. Highly recommend it.
Writing that down in my notes as we speak. Thank
Yes,
you.
it's super important.
So with all that, how do you think about like obviously you're an extremely ambitious person and you've talked about that you generate a lot of gratitude and you think a lot about gratitude. So how do you kind of balance like the gap and the gain type thing?
Mm,
Like how do you think about balancing where you're at versus where you want to be, but also recognizing where you're at versus where you were and
mm.
acknowledging the gain that you've done and also, being staying hungry, so to speak.
Dude, that is such a good question. My goal initially was 10 grand a month in passive income. That was the
I think
goal.
that's everyone's goal.
It
Everyone
was
I've
for some
talked to
reason I
with
was like,
this.
if I can make like 120 grand a year, I will
Right.
be like in rental income. I will be like so happy. And
Right.
and then we like exceeded it, and it's just like now I'm doing it for fun. Like it's not even about the money. It's just like I love the team. I love hopping on meetings and making people laugh and going through our KPIs, and I've been around it, so I can add value, and I feel valued, and at the same time I'm adding value, and it's yeah, and that's a big part of the reason why we have never done a fund, because with a fund you have all this money that you've raised and you got to go spend it, and you kind of like have this pressure to do deals, even if it's not like the best deal, it's an average deal. You kind of can
Right.
you just got to do deals to package together this portfolio. And I just would rather be opportunistic. I have a wholesaler background. I want to buy the best deals, and we'll wholesale some of the ones that that we just don't like for whatever reason. But I think it's important to stay grounded, be grateful, and understand that there's things that happened in my journey that were outside of my control. I'm a
Mm,
believer. God has placed his hand on my shoulder and guided me certain, like sitting at that event, sitting next to the guy from Goldman Sachs.
right.
Like, what are the chances of that happening? Right? Like, I could sit here and try to take the credit, but there's, you know, I was at God just was like, hey, this is supposed to happen. You're supposed to meet these people. And I thought I
Right.
was going to work on Wall Street. I wanted to be a finance guy. I wanted to be, stockbroker. And, I'm in the trailer park business. I never in a million years would thought that that's where I would have ended up. But I'm so happy here. This is my path. And I think as soon as we can all kind of come to grips with that and just accept that, hey, like everybody has different strengths, everybody has different weaknesses, and if you know everybody has their own thoughts on the spiritual side of things, but me as a believer, it's just my faith in Jesus Christ, and just gratefulness for what he did on the cross, makes everything just kind of tie together and make sense.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So it's a perfect segue into mentorship. So you got mentorship kind of early on in your career. You sought out a mentor.
Mm.
How did you do that? And what would you recommend to people who are looking to seek out a mentor? What's a pragmatic way that they can find someone, attract someone, and then kind of, it sounds weird, but enter into a mentor-mentee relationship?
So good. Yeah. Like there's so much knowledge out there, first off, that is free on
Mm-hmm.
podcasts, on YouTube, on other avenues. So I would just really make sure that you take time to learn through those avenues. But then also don't be scared to reach out and just call people. Like there's two guys that I totally looked up to, and I literally called them up. And I've called people, like I tried to get a hold of Sam Zell for the longest time and I never got a hold of him. But I called him and I was like, hey, I was going to go to his office and just try to meet him. Unfortunately, he passed away. But I called other big fish that were in my space in manufactured housing, and was so surprised how generous they were with their time to come meet with me. And they it was like there was something in it, like they were getting something out of it
Mm-hmm.
too, you know?
So
So
what would you say, like, because it's such a great point, but what would you literally say? So let's say you get someone on the phone who you've really looked up to and you're like, oh snap, I didn't think you'd answer. Now what? Like, what does the script
yeah,
look like?
I would say, hey Jeff, I've been wanting to talk to you for a while. I want to add I love what you're doing. I want to add value to what you're
Mm-hmm.
doing. I'll work for free. I'll do whatever I have to do. How can I just get connected? And I just want to learn. I'm really good at sales and sales management. That's what I've been doing. And I have about X hours a day that I can, you know, add value to you by doing XYZ.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just try to just lead with that, and get to know them too beforehand, so you kind of know things that you can talk about, and kind of intertwine that. But I think if you lead with adding value, they're not going to be able to just shoo you away.
Right. Right. And so has that happened to you? Because now you're kind of on the other side and you can probably give mentorship, right? So have
Yeah.
people approached you with that, and have you, taken them up on it, so to speak?
Yeah, and a lot of times people will reach out and I'll talk to them for an hour, and then I'll never hear from them again. And and
Mm,
and I, we had a good talk, and I kind of told them, hey, this is my path. This is kind of what I would recommend. And I think a lot of people, they get nervous around raising capital. That's like the
right.
the recurring thing is they're you know they- they're they're nervous to just create a Rolodex of everybody they know and
Right.
start dialing for dollars. And I was never scared of that. I was always just, I was in sales. I'm going to pick up the phone. I'm going to hear a lot of no's, but somebody's going to say yes. And I'll never forget the first investor that I approached to invest with me told me no. He basically, he was like the richest guy. He coached me in basketball when I was like a little kid. He was like the richest guy my family knew. Guy drove like an Ashton Martin, and I was like, hey, I really want to go to lunch. Can I buy you lunch? And we're sitting at lunch, and I show him my pro forma to the 67 lot mobile home park we were talking about earlier. I showed him the pro forma, and I was like, this is a good deal. And he goes, Andrew, dude, I love you like my own son, but there's no way in beep that I'm investing in a trailer park with you. That's what he told me. And it was okay. I needed that, right? And that, I needed that experience, but it's not for everybody, right? Like you just have to find the people that'll say yes, and they're out there. If you knock on enough doors, ring enough doorbells, pick up the phone enough times, it'll
Hmm.
happen.
Man, so cool. So cool. Well, Andrew, where can people find out more about you, about what you're doing, about, yeah, what's going on in your world? How can people get a hold of you?
Dude, thank you so much, Jeff, for having me. I really appreciate it. I love the podcast. If anyone would like to get a hold of me or ask questions or anything, you can reach out via my website, which is keelteam.com. That's just KEEL. Team is in basketball team.com. Fill out the contact form. I get emails from everybody that submits that form, so I'll see it, and I'd be happy to chat with you about anything you have questions on.
Man, thank you so much. Thank you. And for anyone who's interested, and learning more about your investments, is that also the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, we have case studies on there and everything. You can find out everything on the website.
Okay, great. And what are you looking for? Like, what can people help you out if they listen to this and they're like, oh, I'd love to help that guy. I want to add value to him. Is there anything in particular you're looking for right now?
It's a good question. Yeah, the bottleneck in my business is finding new deals, and nothing can replace being hyper local and to a group of mobile home parks and going and driving by, talking to the owners in person, like building relationships. That nothing can replace that. So I can't be
Mm,
everywhere at once. So our acquisitions team does what they can, by cold calling and things like that, but nothing beats being able to just drive over and talk to the owner, establish that relationship, tell them, hey, I'd be interested in buying this mobile home park whenever you're interested in selling, and just staying in contact. So everybody can do that. Like it doesn't
right,
take like a master salesperson to just say, hey, here's 10 mobile home parks around where I live, and I'm going to talk to these people once every 3 months, because guess what? I guarantee you once a year, one of those parks is going to sell. And if
right,
you're in the conversation, at least having a shot at it, like you could bring that deal to me and I could partner with you and we could raise the money. I could help manage it. Like you have options when you can bring a deal to somebody that's already in the space and you can learn a ton. And I think that would be a great way for somebody to add value.
amazing. And just remind people, lots with over. Do you have a threshold for?
Over 50 lots.
Okay,
And then yeah, I mean, just really anything over 50 lots. We don't look at like, 50 lots and then 25 are RV. We really like
got it.
true manufactured housing lots that are over 50 lots.
Got it. Okay. Well, if anyone listening knows of any parks that's coming to mind, please reach out to Andrew. We'll link to your website. And thank you so much for chatting with me today, Andrew. I very much appreciate you and wish you as much success as I can on your journey.
Hey, thank you so much, Jeff. I'm super grateful you had me on here, and congrats on the newborn coming in June next year.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Looking forward. Alrighty. Bye, everybody.